There we go. Hi, everyone. If you're tuning in and you are just joining us on the live stream, a very warm welcome to you. I'm going to be with you in just a moment. There we go. This is just me trying to pick up the live stream, which I've done. And I see there are already a couple of you with us on the live stream. So wonderful to have you here. Please do drop me a line and let me know who are you, where are you listening in from, and let's open up a conversation. Today we've got the wonderful Miguel Dean. Miguel, welcome. It's so good to have you back for the third time. Is it the third? I think so.
I think it is the third. Yeah, I think it is our third.
Yeah.
We do the Trinity. Yeah.
Ah, good to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Kerry. Yeah. It's always. Yeah, let's see where we travel today, huh?
Exactly. And wherever we travel, we will be holding conversation about the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine and watch them interweave and see where this conversation goes. So, oh yes, Pia, hello from Sweden, and Sonia, hello from Dubai. Well, in case you didn't know, I'm in South Africa. Miguel, you're in the UK, right?
Yes.
So we're having a global conversation right now, everybody, and I hope that you can feel that, because there's something very beautiful about bridging together through all of these continents and all of these different faces and places. Here we are coming together as one heart. Now, Miguel, as much as I've had you on this show before, I've never done you the service of reading your bio. And I have to tell you that that's purely because I forget. I've got a memory like a sieve. But do you know, I was reading your bio just the other day and I thought to myself, wow, there's stuff on here that, do you know, is pretty damn amazing. So if you in the audience have not had the privilege of hearing this wonderful man's bio, I want you to take a listen. Miguel Dean walks the path of the sacred masculine as seer and catalyst and holder of sacred space, and is a writer and author of his latest book, Bring Him Home, a twin flame love story. By the way, I have heard rave reviews about your book. This is the really interesting part. It says he was born in 1968 in Colchester. Okay, that's not the interesting part. Where he had a challenging start to life. This is the interesting part, which included the death of his mother from cancer when he was only 7 months old. Now, as much as we've spoken about that on the show before, we've never spoken about this. As a result of his early difficulties as a young man, he spiraled down into a life of violence, petty crime, addiction, and homelessness, in which he spent 7 years living on the road as a new age traveler. It was the love of his newborn son that inspired and motivated him to begin to take responsibility and make changes. This was the beginning of a rich and varied and at times extremely challenging journey to return home to physical health and inner union. I did not know that you had such a wonderfully checkered past.
That's a lovely way of putting it. Thank you. Yeah.
However did I not know that about you? And I have read your bio before, but obviously that just, I don't know, it didn't penetrate whenever it was that I read it. When was this? When was this life of having spiraled down into violence, crime, addiction, ultimately homelessness? How many years ago is this?
Where are we now? I'm 51 now. So yeah, it was sort of pretty much from the age 20 to 27. That was where the kind of got really interesting, really sort of dark, shall we say.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, Kerry, that you're outside. It's further evidence for me that, that your outside reality, your external reality is a reflection of your inner state. And, as a result, my mom died when I was young, and my stepmom was, she didn't know how to love me and my brothers and sisters, and she was really angry and violent and abusive. So it was always like, there was a lot of fear around. It was always in fight and flight. That just kind of, communicated to me. I internalized what happened to me as a child, as we do, that I am not worthy of love, that I will never be anybody, and I'll never achieve anything. So unconsciously, I quite quickly created, you know, a life that reflected those beliefs back to me.
Wow. Yeah. How unhappy were you back then?
I was, yeah, it's funny. There's a little bit of bliss in the ignorance. I didn't realize I was unhappy till I was probably 26, 27, and that's mostly because I was so pissed and stoned and out of my face for an awful lot of the time. You know, I was self-medicating, and so I was numbing myself, and I was keeping the stopper on all those kind of emotions and all that stuff, you know, that was buried deep in my core, really. So it wasn't till right towards the end. It wasn't really till my son was born. You know, my son was born on the road. I say on the road. He was born in a field under an oak tree on a full moon. So he arrived, and it was, I had this belief, this idea that this would make me a man, and all of a sudden everything would be better because I was a father. But the reality was slightly different than my, you know, than my fairy tale wish. And I actually, yeah, it sunk me deeper, and the drugs I was taking weren't really working anymore. They weren't keeping the stopper on stuff, and I was just getting more and more angry and needy and depressed and pretty horrible to be around, really. So yeah, it was right towards the end, and it was yeah, I just woke up one morning and thought, you know, what am I really bringing to this dynamic, you know, of my partner and my son? Perhaps they would be better off without me. Perhaps I should just get out of here. But I knew that if I did get out of there, I would probably spiral down into even more of a shadowy world. You know, quite a lot of my friends had died by this time of overdoses and suicides and car crashes and all the crazy lifestyle that we were living. So it was like, okay, so I've got that choice, or I'd heard about this thing called counseling, you know, I'll go and try and sort myself out. And yeah, I jumped in my van one day and went into town and just sort of wandered around. I went to a mental health place that I knew and said, you know, I need help. I've been living out, you know, sort of under the radar outside of the system for 7 years. I didn't know how it worked. Well, I'd been on the road, computers and the internet had happened, and I kind of like missed it all, you know. But I found a counselor, you know, synchronicity sort of led me to this counselor, and he was really my guardian angel, you know. Just in a few conversations with him, I realized for the first time how the way that I'd been living was connected to my childhood and what had happened to me, you know, as a boy, and a baby, and as a young man.
Yeah.
So then it was, yeah, that really took the stopper. That was when, and then things got really bad because all that suppressed emotion and everything all of a sudden came gushing out, and I got very ill and very depressed. And yeah, there was a few years coming out of that one.
Wow. You know what? I have to tell you, I didn't even realize earlier that I was crying. I just felt a tear coming down my cheek because your story moves me so much, Miguel, because I know you as this powerful, divine human being. And to think of where you were and how much you have transformed yourself. It's such testimony to the power of humanity. So very often we think, oh, my situation, you know, because this is how the ego speaks. The ego says, no one understands my situation. My situation is so impossible because blah, 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 blah. And the ego will convince you that nobody's ever been through anything quite as bad as your situation.
Yeah.
But to overcome, to really just look at yourself in the mirror as you did, and to overcome whatever it is that you needed to, the pain that you needed to face and to transcend, the grief that no doubt you needed to grieve at the loss of your mom. It just warms me so much to consider what you've done. You are miraculous, because your life was clearly on a trajectory. and you are living one that I don't think you would have dreamed of back then.
No, no, certainly not. If somebody had said to me when I was begging on the street saying, could you spare a little change? You will be doing this in 30 years' time or 25 years' time. No, I would have, I certainly wouldn't have believed them. But and thank you for what you said, Kerry. It was my time to fill up a little bit because, I guess, the mind always wants to focus on what we haven't done and, and what we've yet to achieve and, and so on. And occasionally it's good for me to remember where I've come from. And, but when I wrote my first book, it was testament to me that we're all living different versions of the same story. And it's, it's like comparison is irrelevant. It's of no value at all, is it? Because there are so many people whose stories are so much worse than mine, or so much more horrific. And there are other people who apparently have had quite a cushy life, but they have their wounds, and it's this incredible magic, divine orchestration that everything that is needed for our highest growth and evolution is just put in place. And I know that was exactly what I needed in order to be where I am now. The journey is the destination, and if my mother hadn't left, because I believe that she agreed to leave. It was what was needed. She paid a massive price to leave behind all her children so that they could embark on the journey that they needed to. And I know that is so interwoven in my honoring and reverence and my work and love of the divine feminine, because I tasted it for that little while with my mother, and then it was gone. So it was that kind of programmed me to go in search of that again, to spend my life looking for that sweet amber that I had tasted for that little while, but then all of a sudden was gone.
Do you dream about reunion with your mom one day?
I've never dreamt that. No, I've never dreamt that, Kerry. I kind of feel that I suppose that's one of the reasons why I have such a passion and a love for the land and for the Earth Mother, because I feel that she is there. The divine feminine has many beautiful manifestations, and one of those manifestations is woman. But another one of those manifestations is in creation, and that is constantly giving birth. And so I that's what brings me some soothing and stuff sometimes when I might feel a little bit, why did it happen? What would it be like to have a mother? Sometimes I do think, well, what must it be like to have a mother? But okay, well, that wasn't my journey this time round.
Yeah. And the amazing thing about what would it be like to have a mother is, like you said, it made you connect with another mother.
Yeah.
I can so relate to that. As a young child, my dad and I were incredibly close, but he really disappeared from my childhood around about, I think I was about 6 or 7. And he didn't die, at least not when I was a young kid, but he may as well at that time have just not been there. I just didn't see him. He totally disappeared from my life. And so I'd had much longer than you. You had a few months. I had a few years of my father's love, and then he was gone.
Yeah.
And so my craving for love eventually turned to seeking, but my seeking back then already was a seeking for God. I just knew I've got to go. I've got to go straight to source. This isn't even a dad that I need. This isn't even a husband. Maybe later one day. This is the big man. I've got to find the real source of fatherhood. Somehow that was impassioned in me, and so it absolutely fueled who I am today. So I do see the perfection, in all of our journeys, all of us. And, you know, you said earlier, well, there's people who've had far worse, there's people who've had far easier. Absolutely true. But, you know, it doesn't take away the importance of our journey.
No, no, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's really important that we do honor our journey, and
Yeah.
we honor this human journey, and yet also that we don't get lost in it. There's a kind of paradox, isn't there? You know, that we honor the journey, and at the same time we kind of know it's a virtual reality game that's playing out. You know, there is something else that is the consciousness, the I am, that is observing and witnessing that journey.
Absolutely.
Mm.
That was quite perfect what you just said, by the way, that yes, we are here to honor it, but not to get lost in the story of our lives. But I think that when we truly do legitimately, genuinely come into self-honoring, I think that that's the basis upon which that release happens. So we get to release the story, which is ultimately the story of the ego. We get to release the story in order to step into the truth of who we are. But what facilitates our ability to do that is that moment where we can just be in honoring, not the pain of the ego, because the honoring is like that neutralizing force.
Yeah.
So here we are, we're talking about self-honoring. Let's talk about loving relationships where we extend that honoring of self to another. Because what we're talking about today is the sacred masculine expressing himself in a loving relationship. And I wonder, as we have this conversation, I wonder how many listening know what that looks like, what that feels like, what that sounds like, how it presents itself. So tell us a little bit about that from your perspective. How does the sacred masculine be in a loving relationship? What does he do that's different to the egoic masculinity?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks, Kerry. I guess the first thing that comes up for me is understanding and knowing that conscious relationship, the purpose of a romantic relationship, is in order to bring us home to the truth of who we really are. You know, it's another, or for me, you know, because of my story, it seems it was chosen for me. This is the route that you will take. You know, perhaps some may use, meditation or you know, all sorts of different things, a mantra and so on. But mine was definitely all about conscious relationship, and it's understanding that the partner that we attract into our life is the person that is best equipped to open and make visible the wounds and the aspects where we are not being loved ourselves. So there's this, you know, there's always a looking inside. When my partner does something which upsets me, instead of, you know, pointing the finger and saying you've done this and you need to do it differently, it's okay, this is interesting. So what is it in me that is reacting in this way, and what is it in me that I need to, you know, transform, to change, to see differently? So there's this real acknowledgement that of the mirror aspect, I suppose, of our partner. So, you know, for example, just to make it a bit more concrete, my partner kept leaving me. She kept, you know, she would leave sometimes emotionally. If things got tricky to begin with, she would leave emotionally, and sometimes she actually left physically when you know, it all just got too hot and it was just too full on. So that triggered my mother wound of the abandonment and being left and the loss of my mother, and enabled me to it kind of like took the stopper off, you know, all that the last remnants of the pain that was still inside me, that I was still carrying, and allowed me to release that and to set it free. It allowed the man in me, the sacred masculine, if you like, to take the lead and to placate, to soothe, to reassure the wounded little boy that is inside me, that was inside me, that it's okay. That's done now. This is done. So that's one of the really, you know, that's I guess one of the key things that really comes up for me. It's
Yeah,
it's
it is
about
key.
responsibility. Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge right there, because it implies so much. It implies that you're not moving into judgment of the other person on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's talk about the divine masculine in a relationship. Who's he going to be in a relationship with? With the divine feminine. And this is where two people get to really meet each other
Mm-hmm.
in their divinity. Gay relationship, straight relationship, irrelevant. It is two people meeting each other in their divinity. And I actually really love that our conversation led us to talk about self-honoring, because how spectacular is it really to just be able to honor yourself? Because when you can do that, you can honor another. You know, I've had my husband watch me fall apart at the seams, and likewise, I've watched him, and I've learned, and he's learned, to just honor where the other person is. I don't need him to change, but I trust him to change what he needs to, and likewise.
Yeah.
So there's such a power there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it takes a while, doesn't it? Because it's a dance. Like I remember, you know, at the beginning, you know, the triggering was, you know, sometimes the upset and the emotion and so on would last for days. You know what I mean? But it just gets, the more you deepen the trust, and the more you keep doing the work, and the more you remind yourself, and the more you can quickly come out of the emotional fog and go, oh yeah, it's this happening again. You know, this is, let's do it differently.
Yeah.
And then it gradually becomes easier. But it's, you know, it's not, it's a work in progress. It's always a work in progress. You know, there are still times where, you know, it's not like it ever becomes, not in my experience, totally smooth, because there are always other layers. You know, there's always something else, but we behave in a lot more conscious way. You know, it's almost like as soon as there's emotion, this came up recently, and as soon as there was this kind of, oh, we seem to be, there's a disconnect, and there's a kind of annoyance, and there's, you know, there's a irritability and stuff. It's like there's a golden rule that we've started applying, which is just to face each other, just to connect as best we can with each other and say, I'm scared. There is fear here. There must be fear here, because if there is not love, then it's something that is arising from fear. So let's just both acknowledge that we are scared, that there's some fear here. And then immediately with that, there's this softening that takes place, you know, and then we can start speaking again from the, you know, from that sacred place and that honoring place, rather than from that wounded place.
Yeah. And it takes courage to meet each other there. Because in traditional, I call it traditional relationships, in relationships where they haven't discovered their own inner divine. You remember those. We all had them, I'm sure. In those relationships with self and with others, there was only blame. There was only, you've hurt me and you've done this wrong, and because of you, I am miserable. And there was so much expectation on partners. Man, the fact that the divorce rate is what it is no surprise. Because how were we ever going to remain married to, committed to somebody who we were projecting all of our stuff at? Because that's really what it was.
Yeah, you know, and it's not surprising. It's all about conditional love, isn't it? Because that's certainly what I experienced as a child. My parents' love was conditional. If I behaved in the right way, then, you know, and I didn't upset them, or I didn't do the wrong thing, which their judgment of what was right and wrong, then, you know, then there was some, you know, some fragments of love. But if you didn't, love was withheld. And, you know, so that was really deeply imprinted onto us, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we have this situation where, you know, I believe that the majority, you know, it's like the Hollywood myth of what romantic relationship is all about. The majority of it is codependency.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? For the 2 hours of that movie, that Hollywood romance, for those 2 hours, that relationship works.
Yeah.
But beyond those 2 hours, I'm telling you right now, hands down, that relationship, no matter how glorified it is,
Yeah.
It's in the dustbin, because when two people are not meeting themselves, their divinity, and sharing from their divine space. And I love the way that you do it with your partner, where there's that honesty of saying, oh, okay, there must be fear here because there's a lack of love. Therefore, what could this be? There is a way that my husband and I do it. And I think everybody, and I'd really love to hear this from the audience, what do you do? How do you navigate kind of conflict in your sacred divine relationships? So in mine, Miguel, we joke, we laugh a lot, because it is true that you can say something in a joking manner. What's that saying? Many a true word is said in jest. You can say something in jest that, if it wasn't cloaked in humor, might be terribly offensive. So what we've both learned to do with each other is really poke fun. And we do, thank God. I don't think this would work with many people, but it certainly works with us. We poke fun at the other person's ego. So for example, you know, he might do something, or I might do something, and we'll say, oh yes, that's right, because you're the only one with an opinion. And then the other person will go, yes, exactly, I'm glad you know that now. So we'll have this kind of joke. It really is a joke, because actually when you stop being ashamed of the ego and afraid that the ego has some kind of power over you, it really is funny. We do honestly crack ourselves up when we see our own behavior. And with that humor comes an instant release, comes an instant lightness. So I do believe everybody has their own way of relating to each other, but however it is, the baseline is that they're coming together from one divinity, self-honoring, to another divinity in equal honoring.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, there's a lot of there's a lack of clarity, I guess, and it seems, particularly in the twin flame community, that, you know, that there's still this, it's still so closely connected to the whole Hollywood, you know, romance myth that this other person will complete me. Now, you know, I guess it's that this other person will facilitate me completing myself. That's, I guess that's I've not quite thought of it as succinctly as that, but that's actually what happens. But, you know, where the Hollywood movie ends, you know, there's all the sort of chase and the, will they get together, won't they? And then, oh, they've got together. Oh, right, now the music, da 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 da, it's over. It's like, that's when things really start getting interesting. Like, you know,
exactly.
that's when the fireworks start, you know, and so on, and the, you know, and the purging and the catharsis and the, you know, all the rest of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I want to do a quick check-in with our audience who's with us. Hey, to the 20 odd people who are with us live. Abby says, I love this conversation. Thank you so much. Hey, Rosie Neal, darling. How are you doing? Michelle Muller, who I've got tomorrow as a very interesting guest. I'm really looking forward to that. Michelle's listening in, and she says, you know, there's learned behavior that's passed down through the generations. And that's something that I was thinking as we were talking earlier. I was realizing, you know, we've really had nobody to model this for us, have we?
No. And it's a beautiful point, because it is, you know, my partner and I say this quite often. It's like, we remember we are doing this for the collective,
Mm.
and we are stopping, you know, we are saying no more, thou shalt not pass. It stops here. This doesn't continue anymore, you know, and it's been backed up and backed up and backed up. So it's big work, you know. It's not, it's not to be, you know, sneezed at. It really is. Yeah. It's full on at times.
Full on. Yeah, I think that's an understatement for many people. Hello to Doors, who's just said hey to us. Abby says, what if, this is an interesting one, what if the person is not self-aware, or uses non-monogamy to disguise sharing depth of feelings or distraction, just not ready on their journey to evolve in this way? So the bottom line that Abby's asking is what if the person is not as self-aware? What would you say?
Mm. Well, I guess that you have two options there. I mean, if you've attracted, because if, you know, whoever you attract into your life has exactly the right, you know, will create the right conditions for you to see what it is that you need to heal within yourself.
Yeah.
So, you know, without knowing more about the story, generally what happens when I'm working with people and there's something like this going on, that, you know, there's a lack of commitment. It's quite possible that was around in their childhood, that the masculine, their father, perhaps was a bit absent, where it wasn't totally committed, that, you know, they didn't feel really connected. So they're attracting somebody like that into their lives to, you know, in order to heal that wound of the little girl around her father. So she has a choice to be with that. You know, so it's kind of like, yeah, turning the finger around the other way. Instead of, oh, he's not attracted, he's not committed, and so on, and he's not so conscious. It's like, why have I attracted a not committed, unconscious man into my life?
Yeah. Spot on, 100%. Because that's the easy one. And Abby, thank you so much for your question, because I think a lot of people will hold questions like that. So what do I do when my partner does X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be, right? I think that you're absolutely right, that it gets to be the mirror. And you get to look at that mirror and go, do I like what I see in the mirror?
Yeah.
And what is this mirror showing me that I need to address inside of me? Because ultimately, our relationship, and this might sound like a contradiction, but ultimately, our relationship with our partners is not about them.
No.
It's about us, really.
Yeah.
It's about us. And so if we can begin to take ownership of self at that level, then we stop putting so much pressure and blame on the other person. Yeah. And Abby's just commented and said, I did not think of that. The childhood wound of non-commitment, very, very often. That is, could I say very often or always? I think I'm going to go with always. That's where the wounding is. It is in childhood. And of course we play it out in our adult loving relationships.
Yeah. And you know, you can the interesting thing about relationships is, like, it's like the practical part of an exam. It's like you can work by yourself and do all this work on your inner child and the, you know, union of your masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
But you just get yourself in relationship, just see who's attracted to you. That is the practical side of it. It's like you can measure what's going on internally by the people that you attract into your life. So you, if you want, you can say, I don't want this non-committal man in my life, but thank you very much for showing me that there's some more work that I need to do, you know, on you know, internally. So then we do more of the work internally and some of the healing, and use whatever modality or whatever that we want to use. And then, you know, when we're ready, we go, okay, let's test the water again, and let's go out dating and see you know, see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. One comment that I want to go back to, just in case Abby hasn't seen it, a great comment from Rosie, who says, I think it allows Abby to discern her wants from her needs. and what she's going to allow in her life. Yeah, so that's really empowering for Abby. Thank you so much. Michelle says, I married a man who was like my father and I ended up divorcing him. Michelle, how many people right now listening can say that if it's not I married the man or the woman, it is I at least dated them? We've got to.
Yeah.
Because how are we going to clear that stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely true. Something that I was going to add in here was, so often we ask our partner, please see me, or even an accusation, you're not seeing me.
Mm.
We have these needs which we expect another person to fulfill. But this is the important thing that I want to say. You cannot ask your partner to give you what you cannot give you. So you don't get to tell your partner, you disrespect me, if you've disrespected yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to respect yourself. So whatever it is that you want, you look at your relationship and you go, well, I want X, Y, and Z from my partner. Good, then give it to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Give it to yourself. See yourself, love yourself. Do whatever it is you need to do so that never becomes somebody else's responsibility but your own.
Yeah. My partner has this introduced me to this great sort of like saying. She just calls it Teflon. You know, the Teflon, the non-stick stuff on frying pans. So you know, if you're not giving it to yourself, if you're not honoring yourself, it doesn't matter how much your partner honors you, you won't feel it. It'll be like just slipping off the Teflon. It won't go in. It won't penetrate. You know.
Yeah.
So that, you know, it's a clear indication again that, and I wonder whether, well, you tell me, Kerry, whether this resonates for you, but you know that when we hear compliments, they're pretty Teflon-y. They slide off, and there's not a big. But if there's a criticism or
Great
there's
point.
something, and it's like whang, it's straight into the heart, and it's like, oh, I really feel that. I wonder to what extent everybody feels that to a certain extent, you know.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is a completely human reaction.
Mm.
I don't know many people who have it the other way around.
No.
But we should, and it would be wonderful to.
Mm.
But that's absolutely true. We do tend to hold, and even in loving relationships, you know, I remember going through a phase with my husband, and he would say, "Oh, you do this and you do that." He would say to me, what was it? You're abrasive, or you're asking me for too much." And I would say to him, but what about all the loving things that I've done? Why is it in an argument that you can only ever focus on the things that I haven't done? And thank God for humor. Thank God for humor, because it's in that moment that he'll say, because I don't want to see them right now. and that's a perfect description of that moment where people are coming to boiling point and using honest humor to diffuse the situation. Because honestly, from there, we can move forward. But how beautifully, beautifully true. I've seen it in my relationship. I've seen it in myself. Somebody disses you in some way, and then you gravitate to that experience. And we crave being loved, but when we get being loved, we tend to go, okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably quite a good measure of, you know, again, you know, it's a kind of like a test, just for us to measure and say, how am I doing on my self-love? You know, how much is the, you know, when we get to the point where there is no Teflon, where we can feel, I guess in a way, I don't know. I don't know whether, you know, we arrive at a place where, you know, where it's all just kind of interesting that we're detached and we're the observer and we're coming from this higher place. And when somebody says something beautiful to us, it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. And that's lovely. And somebody, you know, because it's always somebody else's opinion, isn't it? It's just somebody else's opinion. And so really both of them should be as valid or invalid, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that you Again, Miguel, you're so good at doing this. You hit the nail on the head. You got it exactly. It's ultimately irrelevant to us what another person thinks about us, because it's not even about us.
Yeah.
You know, my great, beautiful friend who I love so much, Colin Joe Byrne. Colin is so full of wisdom. And one day I was really hurt, Miguel, because somebody had said something mean. And I felt like a girl at school, and somebody had been mean to me. And I was so hurt. It really did put me into my childhood. And I went to Cole because I couldn't think of anybody better to talk to. And I said, Cole, this is the situation and this is how I feel. And he said, Kerry, that's okay. He said, everybody's got the right to be wrong. And give that person that's upset you the right to be wrong about you. They're allowed to, and it's actually got nothing to do with you. And then he said to me, do you know how I handle it when people are not nice towards me? He said, I handle it in the same way as when people are nice to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. He was the first one that introduced me to that. You're the second one that's corroborated that. I absolutely know that what you've just spoken, Miguel, is 100% truth. At the end of the day, we should detach from both of them.
Yeah.
The compliment and the insult.
Yeah. But, you know, when we, the more deeply we are rooted in the divine, you know, in the present, in the great mystery, you know, the less that stuff is going to impact at all. You know, it's a little bit, it's not quite the right words, but, you know, we're talking a bit about internal and external validation, aren't we? But it's something deeper than internal. It's not me, it's not my ego on the internal. It's like, yeah, the core, the roots, the 0 point, the consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doors, I think that what you've said is perfect. I feel that our projections onto another are the expectations that we have and hold onto from our past relationships with our mother and father.
Yeah. It's a continuous process of shedding and shedding, you know, those patterns and those imprints till what I call just that we come back to 0 point, so that we're then seeing the other from this totally clear, neutral kind of space, rather than through the lens of these wounds, you know.
Now, we're talking about loving relationships. We're talking about the divine feminine, the divine masculine in loving relationships. We've spoken about it before, Miguel, on a previous show, how ultimately the divine masculine and feminine are expressions of self. But this leads me to a question that I think there will be from a number of people, and that is, what if I can't find a loving relationship? What if I'm single and lonely and can't find? You're talking about loving relationships. I don't even know what that is anymore. What would you say if somebody said, help, help, I want that thing and I can't get it?
Well, you know, I guess it's I don't want it to just seem flippant, because we're kind of like generalizing here, really, but we really come back to what we were talking about before, that what's happening externally is a reflection of what's happening internally. So if you are a woman and you know, and you're lonely and you can't find a man, then there is work to be done with your inner masculine. There is a deeper loving of the self, because, you know, we're back to that, the person that shows up is just a mirror, is just a reflection of what's going on internally for us. So love yourself, work on your masculine and feminine, not just your masculine, but on both. Heal those wounds of the mother, of the father. Do that work with the inner child, and then it has to show up, because as union starts to alchemize within you, you know, the external has to correspond with that, because it is just a reflection. You can't expect what you see in the mirror to be doing differently to the person who's looking in the mirror. They have to happen the same.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's look within yourself. I wrote a piece called "What is the Sacred Masculine," and it's about a young woman speaking, asking a sort of wise old man, and he explains and explains, and she's all the different qualities of the sacred masculine, and then she says at the end, "And where can I find him?" And he says, "He's inside you. He's inside yourself. Do your work, But it's a generalization. There's lots of different factors and stuff, and there may be all sorts of, that I think I want a relationship, but there's a fear, and there's because if there's not one happening, then
Yeah.
on some level we've made the decision that we don't want a relationship. It's just hidden.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that it also gives a person an opportunity to heal and deal with rejection and not good enoughness, because a lot of "I'm single and I'm lonely" is rooted in "I'm not good enoughness." So I
Yeah.
think that even if there isn't a mirror in front of you of a loving relationship,
Yeah.
there is still a mirror in front of you.
Yeah.
And what is that mirror showing you?
Mhm.
The remedy to your discomfort in the world is not necessarily going to be, "Oh, let me put a partner in there because then I'll be loved." It's no, let me love myself because then I'll be loved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's something quite magical, I have to tell you, about being single,
Mm.
because you really get, yes, we do get to see ourselves in a way that we wouldn't ordinarily in a relationship. But when we're single, we get to truly immerse ourselves in our growth. We get to immerse ourselves in ourselves.
Yeah.
There's a gift in both. I don't think, again, this is Hollywood stuff. Hollywood has glamorized partnerships and said, if you want to be one of the cool kids, you need one of these.
Mm.
But we really need to honor both. We seem to keep going back into honoring in this conversation.
Mm.
Honoring of self, honoring of others, honoring of the relationship status, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I really like that, Kerry. That yeah, that the mirror is still there when you're with yourself,
Yeah.
not in an external relationship. There's so much
Mm.
richness, and there's so much that can be learned in that space, and
Mm.
and and I guess it's not, it's where are we putting our focus again, isn't it? Acceptance comes into it. If I'm single, then I'm single, and let's just accept that and surrender to that and be with that, because that must be because everything is happening for our highest good. That must be what I need right now.
Mm.
So let's be with that, and let's fully experience that. I guess if we're denying it and wishing that it wasn't, then we're prolonging life's going, well, you still haven't got it yet. You still haven't
Yeah.
learned the lessons of being single, so you need to be single a bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you do come into relationship, sometimes, it's to remember that if you've been single for a while, and we have this romantic, notion again of, oh, when I'm in relationship, everything's going to be wonderful. It's
I
like,
know.
don't forget when you get in relationship that, fireworks will happen, and you will go to some dark places, and it's not like the Hollywood movies make it out to be all the time.
When you live past the 2 hours of the movie, that's when the real stuff happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
Rosie, really good point. We were talking about being single, and Rosie saying, I think when you're seeking strongly, when you're seeking love strongly, it is you wanting that love. So therefore, you're experiencing wanting and achieving what you ask for, which
Yeah.
of course is wanting. And then she concludes by saying, you don't want to be in a position of experiencing wanting. A partner is not there to complete you. It is to become oneness and maintain independence.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think right there, that is the description of being in a divine relationship. We can call it sacred union. That is it.
Well, there's a bit, I've got something to add to that. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, perhaps it's paradoxical, but it's like, yeah, that there is independence, and at the same time, there is interdependence.
Take us there. Tell us about interdependence.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of because two independent people still doesn't feel like union. It still feels like separation, and it still feels like there is fear and there are barriers and so on. But to be interdependent means that, yeah, it's like we are dependent and we are complete unto ourselves, as much as is humanly possible, or to whatever degree we are. And yet there is an ebbing and flowing of the interdependence as well, a dance of, because it's beautiful. There is beauty in neediness as well.
Mm.
There is beauty in, to become too independent is kind of like, well, I don't need anybody, and it can.
Mm.
To what extent does that smack of the ego again and separation?
Mm.
Where actually sometimes it takes more courage to be interdependent and
Mm.
to go to that place and say, yeah, I am complete unto myself, but it's almost like there isn't the language. I am more totally
Yes.
complete unto myself when I am in this union, and in this dance, and in this merging, and in this the disappearing of the self and the ego in our love.
First of all, you're so right that there isn't the language
Mm.
to express what we need to say. As we come into exploring divinity, we realize that English is just not geared to do this. But what you describe in interdependence, yes, I completely hear you. I completely agree with you. We've got from those in the live stream going, yes, interdependence is key. And Michelle puts it very nicely. She says interdependence creates a third energy from the two.
Yeah,
I like that. Thank you, Michelle. That's perfect.
beautiful. Yeah, the divine union. Yeah, when with the divine child, I guess, if you like. Yeah, the
Yeah.
whole is more than the sum of the parts. Yes.
Mm,
Yes.
mm, yeah. Miguel Dean, it's always just beautiful. Really, I love you. It's beautiful speaking to you. It just flows, and I honor you so much. I think about what we were talking about in the beginning, the man that you've become, the childhood that you faced, the you that you have found in the process. Doesn't matter what anybody's story is. It matters that we're able to do that. Thank you so much for embodying your truth and for living it so beautifully. I just honor you so much.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you. It's my it is my honor to be able to be who I am today. It's a great privilege, and yeah, I don't necessarily want to go through that journey again, but I wouldn't change a thing, because it has brought me to this place, and it has brought me right to this very moment where I am here with you and with the listeners. And there's something very, yeah, just very beautiful about that. It's a unique little miracle that is happening, that we are connected, and we are exploring this stuff, and we are
Yeah.
doing what we can, doing what we can for the collective, and we moving through the mystery as best we can, just with humility, putting one foot in front of the other, and seeing where we end up, just navigated, and as you put in your post, guided by love. Love is the inner compass, which
Absolutely.
we just keep doing our best with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, wonderful man. Tomorrow I'm going to be back on the air. Please go and have a look at samadhispeaks.com. Look on the events page. Do not miss who's coming up. Tomorrow we've got Michelle Muller with us, and we're having such an interesting conversation. It's about something that I think many people will relate to, and that is, how similar does mental illness look to awakening? There's a lot of symptoms which look very, very similar on both lists. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. I'll be back next week with some amazing conversations as well. So please do go and have a look at the events page. Please share this. Facebook is preventing me from doing too much sharing from my page. So I rely on everybody who's listening to please, if this is meaningful to you and if you would like more people to explore their own inner divinity, share this to your groups, share it to your page. Lots of love, everybody, from my heart to yours. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.